I guess this guy got it, and him and his friend decided to change the battery in it. And this is actually a different battery than the one that I saw a few weeks ago. Anyway, they called me and said they had changed the battery. They hooked the cables up backwards, the negative and the positive on the battery. And it was smoking, and they got it unhooked finally, and then the car wouldn't start. They called me the next day and asked me to come look at it. I was out with my wife and just stopped by real quick. And I ended up, we wouldn't crank or anything originally. And it was one of these 15 amp PCM fuses. I turned the key on and no check engine light came on or anything. And anyway, like I said, I didn't have any tools with me. I just stopped by, changed that fuse. It cranked up and started. And I figured it was okay after that. I didn't check anything else out. Well, anyway, he drove it that day or that next day, and he got so far away from his house, and then it died again. The alternator wasn't working. So I believe he went and got, they went and got an alternator for it, and they brought it over here, put a different battery in it, and it made it over here to my house to take a look at it again. And before I put an alternator in it, I wanted to check and make sure everything else was good on it. There is, I believe this fuse here is a generator fuse. And anyway, I ran a quick scan on it. And I got a P0625 and a P0626. Generator field circuit high, generator field circuit low. And I did not want to just put an alternator on without checking it out. Did a little research on the wiring diagram. These have two fusible links in them going from the battery to the B plus on the alternator. And I don't know where they're at on normal fusions. This car is a little bit rough. And I found this down. I followed the B cable and found this. This was encased in this here. And I'm assuming that it somehow maybe connects to the fans here or something, but it was actually down on the exhaust manifold there, and I had to pull it up. I was able to pull it up here, and I got a feeling on most fusions that somewhere it's probably hooked to this fan somehow or something like that. Anyway, I went ahead and tested the fusible links, and you can see, if I can get a good connection. On this side we have power. So the power coming from the battery to the alternator, we got power here. And then if we check this side, and I'm pierced all the way in on that, and we got nothing. So this case was over these two wires here, and these are the fusible links. And you can see here the two fusible links are blown. Probably if we could probably get power out of this one. Yeah, you can see there. Power off that one, and then of course there's not going to be any on that end. So I got a feeling the alternator is probably okay on this. We just need to change these fusible links. These are, according to Ford service data, 20 gauge. I believe they're 20 gauge wire, fusible link. So I'm going to go ahead and peel all this back here. And like I said, if you're having the same kind of issue, maybe you hook your battery up backwards or something like that, you're going to have to pull this out. This will be encased in these. You got to pull these off. This just had some old factory tape on it, and I was able to peel that back and pull it out. And I'm just going to peel this stuff back here, and we're going to see what we can do to solder in some new fusible link wire. I did get some new wire from O'Reilly's 20 gauge fusible wire. Technically, if you were in a bind, you could just bypass that. I don't recommend that. I wouldn't do that, but we're going to go ahead and fix it right and put some new wire in here, and then test the starter, or test the alternator and see if it charges. Alright, so I actually got, I cut that out and kind of peeled back to get to this part here. This cable's pretty thick, and we're going to be putting, I actually misspoke too. I think I said 12 or 20 gauge earlier. It's 12 gauge. It's 12 gauge fusible link wire that we're going to replace it with. That's what was in there from the factory. You can see here, 12 gauge. This is 10 foot of fusible link wire, and we're going to solder that into this end. I went ahead and got both ends cleaned up, and I actually used a Dremel to kind of cut some of the sheathing away and to cut around it, just because it's pretty thick wire and we're going to be going in a smaller wire, so I got to get this back far enough to get it hot to solder it in. And then you're going to put some heat shrink on this long cable and slide it down far enough where it won't shrink while you're soldering. And then we're going to solder in 2 wires. This one had 2 12 gauge wires, so we're going to hook it back up with 2 of these, 2 pieces of that. And we'll make it close to the same length so that we can tape it up and then put it back in this plastic holder. And then we'll tape that plastic holder up, and then somehow try to keep it off the exhaust manifold. Like I said before, it was down on the exhaust manifold. I think it's supposed to be either clicked onto the valve cover somewhere or something like that. I'm not sure. But anyway, that's what I'm going to do. So right now I'm just going to cut some of this wire to the length we need, and then we're going to start soldering this in. Probably need a pretty decent soldering iron. This is pretty thick gauge wire here. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll pick it back up. And I guess I should address fusible link. This wire is basically like a fuse, only it's a wire with the real thick sheeting on it. And what happens is if it overloads it, instead of blowing a fuse, it actually just burns the wire in half, and it has a real thick outer layer on it, and that keeps it from catching on fire. So what happens is the wire will break apart, and then you lose connection. And that's why we don't have connection on this side. We have it on that side going straight from the battery, but then we didn't have it on this side going to the alternator because you know, the connection's broke. And then hopefully that saved the alternator from getting fried. If not, we do have one in the front seat ready to go on, but I'm hoping that all we need to do is just change these 2 wires out, or solder in new wires, and then that should fix the problem. But we'll find out here in a second. I'm going to go ahead and get these wires cut to length, and then we'll start soldering it in and go from there. But I just want to explain that in case you didn't know what a fusible link was or whatever. It's just basically a fuse, but it's a wire instead, and it burns in half usually, and then you get kind of like that black stuff. You know, you can see here it got real hot, it's black, and you can see this wire here, it's real black, so it gets hot when it overloads, and then it just breaks apart. So, and that's pretty common on alternators and starters. A lot of starters, if you hook your battery up backwards like that on accident, you can't have that problem. Now, we got lucky with the PCM. It just blew the fuse over in the fuse box. I don't think the PCM itself's not blown, because the car will run and start. It's just not charging right now. I think there's a good chance this radio's blown. I know a lot of Hondas, the PCM and the radio blow, and that big 120 amp main fuse. But anyway, go ahead and get this going, and then we'll see if this fixes it. Alright, so I just pushed the wires in there. I actually had to use a small torch to get it to heat up, because this wire is so thick. The regular soldering iron was taking forever. So it's not the most prettiest soldering joint, but it is a very strong one. And you just peel these wires back and jam them into this big cable. Heat this up pretty hot, and then just melt your solder into it. I do use a paste. I cover it with some paste first, and then melt it in. And anyway, that's what it looks like. I'm gonna let it cool down a little bit, and then I'll slide the heat shrink back over it, tape it up, and then we'll put this back on the best we can, and then we'll start it up and see if we have if it's charging now. So anyway, that's where we're at on it right now. Alright, so I put that plastic shield back on it and wrapped it up with some tape, more tape. I got the wires in here wrapped, and I'm going to go ahead and try to mount this somewhere else. It looks like it may have went actually up here and then across and maybe over to here. I'm not sure. I'm sure it went somewhere away from the fan and the exhaust manifold. So I'm going to maybe try to get it around this dipstick tube and maybe just tie it on there. This car is not in the greatest shape. It's been looks like it's been in a few wrecks and other things. So who knows really where this was. But it wasn't down on the manifold where it was before. So I'm going to go ahead and try to figure out where to put this at. Maybe behind this dipstick tube, and maybe put a zip tie there or something. I'm not sure. And then we'll go ahead and start it up and make sure that's charging, and then we'll see if it's got any other issues. He said something about it's not communicating with the OBD2. but I hooked mine up and it was working, so I think that's working right. And he said something about the radio, but the radio might have just got fried. I'll check the fuse on it, but my guess is the radio got fried during this. So that's pretty common. That's somewhat common on these. If you hook the battery up wrong, you can fry your radio. So anyway, I'm going to try to mount this somewhere, and then we'll start it up and see if we're charging. All right, before we try to start, we're just going to double test our work here. We had power on this side, you remember, beginning. And we're going to go on this side. We should have power. We got power on that side. So we at least know that that's fixed. We don't know if the alternator got fried. I'm hoping that it didn't. I just went ahead and wrapped it around here, around the dipstick tube. The fan's broken. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of broken and torn away here. So with it here, at least I can get it out of the way. I'm sure yours are going to be mounted somewhere else, by the factory in a good spot. But anyway, now we have power on both sides. This wire goes directly down. This cable goes directly down to the alternator. So as long as the alternator didn't get fried, we should be able to start it up now and have some kind of charging voltage. So I'm going to go start it up real quick and then we'll check. Alright, so evidently this car has no exhaust on it either. You can see there it was at 1430, so it's charging now. I'm not sure what else I'm going to do to it. I don't think he's even driven this car that much. He just got it, and then the first thing they did was put the battery cables on backwards. So I don't know what else it needs or what the deal is, but I was just tasked to get the car to charge. It's charging now. I'll probably look at the radio. I'm not going to do a lot with that because it's probably fried. I'll check the fuse and all that, but other than that, I think I'm done with it for today. So yeah. It's just a good test. If you have a bad alternator, your fusible links probably are not blown. They usually only blow if you hook the batteries up backward or something weird like that. But it's a quick test also to make sure, see if you're getting power on both sides and all that before you change the alternator. But that's kind of that's pretty rare for them to blow like that. Usually it has to be caused, I would say number one reason is probably, hooking the battery cables up backwards. So anyway, and it was weird because it didn't blow any of the main fuses in the box, just the PCM and the fusible links. I'm surprised it didn't blow, some of the bigger fuses in there. But those all seem okay, so maybe you got lucky. So anyway, that's all for this one. May not be that interesting, but if you do have a problem with the fusible links on the Fusion, at least you know where to go to get it and how to replace it. So anyway, thanks for watching, and always God bless. Alright, so this car doesn't have exhaust on it, evidently. You can see there. The car's charging now. I'm going to go ahead and shut it off.